Hello, everyone, and welcome to TAG Tech Talks. I'm Larry Williams, President and CEO of TAG, and I'm pleased to bring you another edition of TAG's Tech Talks, featuring our technology community's best and brightest leaders. This podcast is all about showcasing what makes Georgia the number one place to do business and bringing stories of how our technology community and TAG members are driving innovation, benefiting our local technology community and making a global impact. Today we have with us Phyllis Newhouse. Phyllis is an entrepreneur, retired military senior non-commissioned officer, mentor, founder and CEO of Extreme Solutions Incorporated, and founder of Shoulder Up. Pioneer in cybersecurity, is the first woman to win an Ernst & Young EWOP Entrepreneur of the Year award in the technology category. Passionate about women-led businesses, Newhouse teaches aspiring entrepreneurs to recognize and capitalize on their leadership skills and empowers others to operate in greatness. We've done part one of this podcast with Phyllis, where we really focused in on the leadership and aspiring and inspiring others. So this time we're really going to talk about Phyllis's experience in technology and a lot of the areas of her expertise, especially cybersecurity. Phyllis, welcome.
Thank you, Larry. Welcome and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. So delighted to kick off. This is our first one of the year, and I'm delighted to kick it off with you.
Well, thank you. And I am so happy to be here.
Well, Phyllis, let's talk about, your wheelhouse. Let's talk about cybersecurity. It's more important today than ever. How has digital and network security evolved over the last, say, decade?
Wow. You know what? When you think about the evolution of technology, and, we want the latest, the greatest, the fastest, the best. We want convenience. We want so many things because of the evolution. But that comes with a price. And so when I look back to, you just think of, Larry, for a moment, all of the ride-sharing platforms, right? Who would ever thought that today you'd be getting in the car with a stranger driving you from point A to B? Still sharing technical platforms that could really answer the call of convenience, right? And so if I look back to over a decade, who would have thought we would have been here? But then there comes that price that we're paying for the convenience. And when you look at the digital technology and you look at the platforms today, we are more vulnerable today than we've ever been because of the evolution of technology, because of the convenience of technology and the multiple platforms that are now being used to answer the call of convenience. So I think what we're seeing now, we're seeing more sophisticated attacks, more structured and sophisticated, and the complexity of some of these attacks and how they're going to impact not just us as a consumer, but how it impacts our national security is what is at risk, is what I'm seeing.
Well, that's been a big evolution, and I think, interestingly enough, I think Georgia's story around cybersecurity is parallel with the world's. We gained a lot of expertise in cybersecurity back with network and internet security, doing a lot of work that, with the Department of Defense and other federal contracts, and then starting great companies like ISS and SecureWorks are sort of the big names. Yeah. But being at the forefront of that evolution enabled a great company like AirWatch to pop up here and really go to mobile security as we're all locking down these, what we call phones, but are really little computers we're running around with in our pockets and our pocketbooks, and how we're even moving, as you mentioned, Uber, to I've heard some people say they think the cars will be the most connected devices in the near future. So I think all of these things are absolutely critical. So I wrote an article recently about the individual responsibility in all of this. So what do you think about this idea of that, someone could figure out your password to your garage that's connected to your phone and then eventually go through a network and get to the power grid? Is that all, is there personal responsibility to our national cybersecurity?
100%. 100%. Larry, when I was in the military, this was something that all military folks during my time anyway took very seriously. Passwords. You never shared passwords. You never did any of that stuff. And the fact this is just a rule of thumb. how many people that you can, and I know you're not one of those people, Larry. I'm going to trust that you're not. But how often do people just for convenience? Remember, I talked about convenience. For convenience, they will go and they will have the same password for everything because it's just easier to remember if I just have one password for 700 accounts that I might have, right? And
And
then
put it on a post-it and put it on your monitor.
yeah, right. Or they put it in their phone, and
Yeah.
so when you think about our personal responsibility to our national security, it starts with you securing your own personal assets first. Whether it's especially when you start taking about your banking account, your things that are easily compromised, and then logging into accounts and not knowing where emails come from, phishing emails attached. I mean, you hear so much about it, but yet people are still making those simple mistakes. Getting an email saying, "Oh, your UPS package has just arrived, but we need you to click on here
Right.
and they click on it, and the next thing you know, their phone is disabled." So when I think about personal responsibility to national security, I think every single person has a personal responsibility to do their part and to make sure that they have safeguards against their own personal assets and those that they've been tasked, such as your corporate. If you're at home, if you think about now, I think about personal vulnerability, your vulnerabilities now in your home because you are on a lot of Zoom calls. You are jumping from Teams to Zoom and not logging out of one account, then logging into your bank account and logging into this account and logging into that account. And so you got so many accounts open because you're multitasking at home. And a lot of people don't think about, have I just shut down my system and powered it back up for the day? When was the last time we did that? So just simple things I think that we can do every day to ensure that that we're personally being responsible for of what our part as a national security.
When we think about national security, if we go back to some of the major conflicts that we've had in World War II and others, there were things that came down to personal responsibility. Everything from coastlines, turn off the lights, and other things that we really enlisted our citizens and our residents to do. And it seems like the similar approach should be taken for cybersecurity as well in the education. How vulnerable do you think our critical infrastructure is? If we think about critical infrastructure, everything from our electric grid, our water sources, absolutely critical and often, taken for granted, our supply chains and others. What is it that cybersecurity has to do with maintaining and securing those critical infrastructure systems?
Here's something fascinating. I was talking to a former FBI agent last night, and we were having security, digital surveillance, and how critical that was yesterday when there was all of these particular cyber outlets that were reporting yesterday that the security camera systems around the perimeters of the Capitol could have potentially been breached. Those things are super important now with our critical infrastructure because you're talking about democracy. You're talking about a lot of things. And so when we're not paying attention to those things and those adversaries, their technical capabilities to intrude into some of our most critical intellectual property, weapon systems, oil, gas, water, you name it. Those are the things that we all owe a responsibility to be paying attention to these things. Like what should I be concerned about today that could impact, communities? And when you start to impact communities with these things, then you start to impact the nation. And so I think we can no longer think of this as on a small scale on just how it impacts you, but how does it impact the broader community and ultimately our nation, right? So I think in terms of the critical infrastructure, we have to be thinking about, our water systems. We've got to be thinking about, our oil and gas. We've got to be thinking about supply chain, food chain, all those things that could impact a whole community.
Oh, I mean, that really makes it big. And it does, and believe it or not, it does get connected back to that individual responsibility where we started, to even making sure that password to your garage is protected as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so funny. Someone told me the other day, they said, I went and to my neighbors, they have this new thing with Amazon where you can actually go and Amazon garage person just let the garage open and put your package in the door. And she said, and I noticed my neighbor's packages had been out there for a couple of days, so I just decided I'd go put them in the garage. She said, oh, and then I noticed they had the Amazon door thing just like I did. So she put in her own code, and their garage door just goes up. And I said, how did you know what code? She said, I didn't.
Right. Could have at least changed it to their address, right?
Right.
So, a lot of the things that we're always, I think, a challenge for us in the technology community is helping our federal leaders and policymakers make sure that our policies are keeping up with technology, because we move a lot faster. And, at TAG, we started the National Technology Security Coalition a few years ago. And one thing that we've been talking about is a rationalization of data breach notification laws, and then also the rationalization of those with state laws. Well, at some point, we think about our companies trying to manage the 50 different standards. It's inefficient. What are your thoughts about federal policy, data breach notification, and others? And how can the private sector partner with our public policy leaders to make sure that we have good, efficient systems?
Yeah, and you know what, Larry, that's a really good question, because I think this has been a problem, until it's mandated federally that there is a set of standards that are applied and highly recommended by our federal government. I don't think this will ever change, because if you think about the notification process, organizations, if I'm going to get slapped a fine, and I say, well, what's worse, the fine or the reputation damage for coming out early and saying there was a breach, right? And when you think of all of the major breaches that we've had in this country over the last 10 years, let's just go over the last 10 years. If you think about all of those major breaches, what took them so long to come out and to notify their consumers that they had a breach, and why did they wait so long? And because the penalties were not stiff enough. I don't believe that one would say, for the risk of getting shut down or reputation damage, or do the public just have a right to know that there's been a major compromise of their data or what have you, right? And so I think we do have to get stricter with the laws. I think there needs to be a set of standards that are applied across the board when there's a breach. If you think about the last breach that everybody's been talking about, what's the real fallout from that last breach? I think there are many, many more companies that are well-known companies that are impacted by this that they won't know, and for months to come. But I do think there should be a great responsibility to the federal government holds those companies accountable to notify folks that they have been breached. And so if you think about today, even in private equity and the VC world, all the when you think about now, part of the due diligence process is going back looking at some of these tech companies that have had major breaches and have never disclosed that information as a part of the due diligence on acquisitions and mergers. And so you can see that there's, even at the board level, there's such a level of accountability now being placed on this. It's almost like you can see the writing on the wall that this is actually going to happen in our federal government, where there are going to be laws and mandates on the notification process.
It's amazing. In some structures now, the chief information security officers are reporting directly to the board.
Right.
They're part of the boardroom conversations. They're elbow to elbow because of the critical infrastructure. Now, do you think that there's also a broader partnership between our government, our Defense Department, and private companies as well? Because I think it's one thing to put all of the burden on the private sector and saying, hey, companies, you have certain compliance issues. Remember, I believe compliance does not equal security. So making sure that we...
Not. Yeah, absolutely not. Larry, I 100% agree with that. And I'll tell you something else. Department of Defense and Homeland Security, I mean, they're they're working on building out, obviously, the National Cyber Range, right?
Right.
Yeah, the NCR. Why is that? And a lot of Americans really don't even know what that is. But why is that agency standing up something so complex as the National Cyber Range is important? Because when you look right now, our federal government and even private sector operating in silos, right? But think about bringing everybody under an umbrella of staging collaborative events to where we can test our posture. What's our cyber posture? Can we withstand a technical warfare really in this country? I mean, if you think about people say, well, we have some of the best cyber folks in the world. Yeah, and so do everybody else. And so when we think about what our cyber posture as a nation, that is a collaborative effort. That is not your federal government. That is not a couple of great tech companies. That is all of us coming together under one umbrella, looking at our technical capabilities. And I think that the federal government could use a lot of the technical capabilities, but there's so much red tape to get companies in who really offer a technical solution. There's the whole, RFP process, and then you have this amazing company over here that has a world-solving problem technical solution that will probably never make it on the shelf of the government, right? And then you have some companies that are doing it better than others, but they're not sharing those best practices in an environment where the government can learn. I think that when you bring some of the greatest companies and some of the folks in academia and our federal government under one umbrella to collaborate, to share on how we enhance and get better with our cyber capabilities, I think that's when you see things like the National Cyber Range will be a great benefit for this country, because you'll be able to bring all these folks under one umbrella to share and to make sure that we're answering the mail and we're really looking at the real cyber posture that we have.
And having the cyber range is a great asset, but it's also easy to distribute and really get it across the country and bring in a lot of different partnerships, because we can do it virtually. And I think a lot of that is happening through the Cyber and Infrastructure Security Administration within CISA, within DHS. And we've got a great partnership with them, and that's who we're working with on some of the cyber policy and bringing the private sector to the table to help have that conversation as well. So I think that's, an excellent asset for us all.
Yeah, and I was going to share with you. So, there's a Business Executives for National Security. That's BENS.
Right, BENS.
And so I'm a member of that. But one of the things I really like, the way BENS has done things too, similar to TAG. When the government has a problem that they're trying to solve, they reach out to BENS, and BENS come in with a group of folks who have the expertise, and they go in and they help the government look at the problem, ask the right questions, and then after those questions have been asked, they go back to the drawing board with the government, collaborative at the table, and come up with what is a real solution. And that is taking best practices from private sector into the government. I've been a part of a couple of those where I've just said, wow, this was amazing to be able to come up with a real solution just by bringing some bright folks together. Not that I was one of them, but anyway.
No, you are. Well, Phyllis, we kind of talked about passwords and all that a little bit. And it used to be that we talked about the cybersecurity and privacy in two different silos. But today and age, they've all come together. And so talk about how is the world and cybersecurity experts looking at that kind of that interwoven approach to security and privacy today? Yeah,
if you were probably asked anybody in this profession, they tell you can't have one without the other. If you think about, on one hand, we say, well, we don't want, Big Brother in our business, but yet we want to be protected. Yet we want to make sure our data is not out there just floating around and sharing of our data. And this has been a conversation for many years, Larry. This is not this is not something that, people just start talking about. We've been talking about that since the evolution of technology and, privacy versus security. I think that everything, if you look at companies like OneTrust here in Atlanta, I mean, they've done a very good job of measuring the privacy posture of a lot of companies around the world in terms of, do they meet the standards? Do they meet the privacy standards? But it's beyond just the just the privacy portion of that, but there's that level of security standards that have to be met too. And so I can't even imagine that you think that you can have one without the other in today's society, especially even in our critical infrastructure. If you think about that, you want the government to protect your privacy and your information, but on the other hand, we were saying, well, I don't want them to get too far into my business. I don't want the government knowing everything about me. And so I think this is always going to be a conversation at the table. What level of privacy should we have, and what level of security should we expect? And I think that really starts a conversation no matter where you go around the world.
And, and that gets back down to some individual responsibility as well. I mean, I think about, and I've actually talked to people about, the gamification of phishing. So let us go, hey, let's play this game. Tell me your birthday and I will tell you your horoscope. And, what is, start, hey, was your mother's name Phyllis? So anything they can do in their phishing to get enough data about you to guess your password or other things.
Absolutely. And Larry, and we're so immune to giving up information, but yet we say we want privacy. And so you go online and you sign up for these free, whether it's a shopping website. I mean, think about even on Amazon. Look at how much information that you fill out to get a Prime account. And everybody wants convenient. It goes back to what I said. We're in the age of convenience, and so
right.
With convenience comes a price. You're not going to be exempt from the price that everybody's going to pay for that convenience that we also want today.
When we go back to large enterprise as well, the old adage that the bad guys only have to be right once. We have to be right every time. We always have to get it right. And the bad guys can just keep firing missiles, so to speak. What do you see? So what are the trends? Where is cybersecurity going? What's in your crystal ball?
Larry, I knew we were going to be talking today, and I have to tell you, over the last 48 hours, the events that's happening in this country, and I'm thinking about cybersecurity in such a very different way. When we start talking about the impact that cyber has on democracies, the impact that cyber has on, different countries and how one country affects another. And when I'm thinking about the evolution of where cyber will be in the next 3 to 5 years, I actually see from a global perspective is that the attacks on countries, democracies, governments are going to be even more complex. And I think that when you look at, and again, you can go out and you can read a lot of this out in the cyber world today, but this is nothing foreign to us. But I think you're going to start to see a lot of these potential hacks or, political hacks that are going to start to come up and rise up even more so now as you start to see what happens to governments around the world. And I think that I think what we should be paying attention to is these large cyber gangs around the world that are forming the political hacks together. And I think that they're going to be so sophisticated and so staged and organized and funded that, when we start looking at the hacks that we've had and the breaches we've had in the past, they won't even compare to what we're going to see in the future. And when you think about this, Larry, someone said this, I was reading on a cyber post yesterday, and it said the world is focused on the pandemic right now. We're focused on the vaccine. We're focused on government elections. We're focused on, social and there's so many things that we're focused on,
Right.
but nobody has their pulse on what's happening in cyber and the intrusion and how this is going to impact us 3 to 5 years. And when you have a government, when we're in transition, there's so many things that are going on. It's like your back door is wide open. And nobody's paying attention that the back door has been left open because there's so many other doors you're trying to close. And so, and this was a great analogy that this person was giving yesterday, saying, it says, hey, people, wake up, the back door is open. Everybody's coming in the back door and they're hiding in closets, waiting for 3 to 5 years to drop this major bomb that you didn't expect. Because if you look at the way cybersecurity has evolved today, and in some of these hacks that we've had, Larry, they're staged, and it's months and months and months where they just wait before you start to even detect that they're there. And so if you think about what's happening now with the back door open, there's been plenty of room for us to have had many intrusions. And how do we know the impact of that? When will we know the impact of, because of everything else that's going on in the world and where our focus have been? And so I think, to me, it's a very scary picture, because if we don't get control of that fairly soon, I think the damage will be forever lasting in this, especially in this country. Well,
we're being leaders in innovation, leading in technology, the most digitally connected country in the world, makes
Absolutely.
us the most vulnerable and the most targeted.
Absolutely.
Very good. And what you've been describing is really, it's we've called it the invisible enemy. These are enemies without borders, enemies without faces. They might be funded from nation states and other sources, but they're not necessarily sitting in particular boundaries that we've been able to identify in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And then too, the level of sophistication is that you still have to have, I mean, obviously we have our national security teams, and people, agencies are quite aware of a lot of the things that are going on. But I also believe that this is going to be a collaborative effort. It is not just the government's responsibility. There are organizations out there that have great technical capabilities that will eventually find their way to offer those services to the government. But I do think that it's going to take all of us paying attention to this and saying, you know what, let's not go to sleep at the wheel here. There's bigger risks for us if this is not a priority. And cyber definitely needs to move to the highest priority in this nation. I honestly believe that.
I agree. It's always a great conversation, but unfortunately we have to wrap up. So
no, Larry, we can't wrap up.
There'll be another one, Phyllis. We'll have another. To everyone who tuned in, thank you for joining us for this edition of TAG Tech Talks. Phyllis Newhouse, thank you again for joining me. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you. Again, Happy New Year. I'm Larry Williams. I'm the President and CEO at TAG. Please find more of TAG Tech Talks at tagonline.org.